Perfect. Excellent. All right. So let's start from the beginning. Again, so you're in New York, and
Yes.
I want to thank you. So here's how I would like to have a conversation. This is just an open conversation. We have 5,400 followers on Instagram, and we take this live one and then we chop it and we broadcast it, or whatever the right word is, and we use on Twitter. We have over 1,000 followers. So it's just a conversation. I'll give you a little background about Amass, which but I think it's important to kind of create a context to conversation. I just want to hear your take on things and how you see the industry and how you see the design. So I've been a real estate developer for 20 years, built thousands of units, very hands-on, so I know construction going well. And then it drove me nuts that the typical construction is 20, 30 or more years behind every other technology. And even if we use some software like, Procore or, stuff like that, it's still nothing compared to what's done in other industry. So we opened Amass, which is a B2B marketplace for construction material. I think the best way to describe it, it's a dating app for buyers and sellers in the construction market material. So we're not Amazon, we don't do the logistics and all that stuff, but we match the local framer, plumber, electrician, the subcontractors, the GCs, the general contractors, and the developers with lumber yards, suppliers, whether in their region or other broader picture. And we've been we've been operating for 4 months, and we're going through the roof. It's going really great. We're in 9 states now, over 69,000 items on the catalog. So we're going very, very fast. The reason why we decided to do a mass live is because we want to hear more of a futuristic take of what's happening in the industry, because we've been dealing with all this thing that did not work from the past. So what I would like to, first of all, so give us a little background about you. I know you went to amazing two schools, but it's been a few years since you finished school. So tell us where you're working, what are you working on, anything you want to share with us.
Sure. So I'm an architect in New York, as you probably heard from before when you asked me where I was. I work for Deborah Burke Partners, which is a practice here in New York doing architecture. We're about 60 people or so, so a kind of a medium-sized, smallish medium-sized firm here in the city. And we work on commercial projects, some residential projects, and institutional work. And that's all over the world, primarily in the United States, but not just in New York, of course. And my background, as some of you guys know, I went to Tulane for my architecture degree. I went to Yale for my undergrad. I would say my practice, and I think this is true of Deborah Burke Partners to a large degree, is very kind of user-centric. Like we really approach design with a kind of humane or human-centered approach to what we're doing, and always thinking about I think in our industry, you often hear the word building occupants, but we tend to call them users, or try to kind of humanize that a little bit and think about who's actually using these buildings and how they're using the buildings. So we're also, at least I'll speak for myself rather than DBP, but very community engagement focused, stakeholder engagement focused, and also really, really concerned about sustainability and climate action on the part of the building industry.
So for a small firm, because 60 people is kind of a boutique firm, if you guys doing both residential, commercial, and institutional or not-for-profit work and worldwide. So what beyond the fact, I think the Yale connection, if I'm not mistaken, the owner is the head of the program, if I'm not mistaken. But
That's
beyond
right.
that, yeah, it's a very, very broad. I mean, I don't know many architect offices that deal with such a broad thing. What's your core business? Is it more the non-for-profit world? Is it more the residential for people who are, doing something unique?
I would say very, very little of it is not for profit. I would say in the institutional side, which is where I focus, it's primarily cultural institutions and also higher education. So, some of our clients are Harvard, Princeton, a major project that I worked on the last couple of years. So schools all over the country, as well as institutions in the arts, we're very concerned with and have done a lot of work historically in both the visual arts and the performing arts. So arts and education in the institutional side. And then on the commercial side, we've done some hospitality work. We've done all of the 21C hotels. There are 9 of those now all around the country.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Which are these kind of cool hybrid museum hotels. Another art, it's a hospitality project, but with a lot of art in it. Big art story there, as well as some multifamily residential here in the city. And then on the residential side, we've done a lot of private homes. We're
Yeah.
modernists, of
So
course, and so those are all very like modern, contemporary
yeah,
homes. But I wouldn't
what would you
say
say?
it's not one or the
Yeah,
other.
go
We
ahead.
do all three. We really, there's not one that's a
That's
central
great.
focus. Yeah.
Well, as a residential developer, and again, I never did like high luxury, like very, very high end. Um, I think budget is a huge part of the choices, whether about design, material usage, etc. Uh, are you dealing with budget concerns and limitation when it comes to building a building for Princeton or for Harvard or any of those institutions?
Of course. I mean, no matter what the scale of the project, the budget is always a concern. And I think especially with even with an institution with these very large scale projects, what they build is part of their messaging and part of their communication to the outside world and part of their brand. I think they're very concerned at the same time about how they spend their dollars and what are the how most effectively what are they getting out of the building project? What are the outcomes that they're trying to get out of a building? I think a lot of institutions think in that way. So yeah, but I would say on any project, whether you could look at it and call it luxury or not, budget is always a concern. I think a lot of projects are kind of not to exceed, and staying on budget and making those kind of decisions and keeping a project on budget all along the way is a kind of critical part of project delivery how we do it.
What would you say is the biggest? What would you say is the largest challenge in staying on budget when it comes to construction
Wow, that's
and
a tough.
project from design?
I, you know, just to roll that back a little bit, I would say one of the ways to avoid that problem and how we think about it is that at the beginning of a project, before we start schematic design, we work very closely with our clients to develop kind of a mission statement for the project where we clearly articulate the goals of the project. And I think a lot of really sophisticated clients may already have done this internally and have a process where they have done some kind of visioning for the project. Some have done it to more than others. So it's critical to have that. And part of that mission statement has to be a sustainability charter, if you will, something that says what are the sustainability goals for the project? Because once you get into the process of design, especially with sustainability, every decision you make really matters. And you have to understand what the real long-term goals are and what the trade-offs are, so that when you have to decide between different things, I can do A or I can do B, I can't do both. You have this charter, you have this mission statement that you can look back on with your client. You can and say, here's what we talked about in the beginning. These are the goals. Does this serve this goal or not? So I think it's being really clear at the beginning what the goals are and identifying what the
Mhm.
potential challenges are going to be. And then as you get into it, the challenges are going to be different from project to project. But if you have that kind of partnering relationship with your client, it helps a lot.
Mm. And would you, so some people are, we have an eco-friendly section in the Mass. It's one of actually their fastest growing. We see the most amount of traffic on it. And I think because of, especially changes of local law, both in New York and in California, that will force people to build with eco-conscious or eco-friendly material. But would you say that still sustainability and design is somewhat of a luxury, or do you think it's possible to build inexpensive construction, housing, commercial offices, whatever it is, with still sustainable material and eco commitment?
Absolutely. And it's critical that we do. And the way that people are, increasingly looking at that question is looking at the kind of whole building life cycle cost analysis, right? Like you have to look at not just the cost of the building itself, but the cost of operating the building. And so like thinking about how using renewable energy and other strategies to reduce the energy use of the building, or, in the long term, we're going to save the client money in operating a building that you plan to have, built and used for 30, 40, 50 years or more. That really adds up. So you have to look at the whole building life cycle, and I think that's kind of part of that equation. But even taking that out of the picture, I think more and more products are coming on the market. More and more kind of techniques or strategies, building techniques and building strategies are coming online to help people understand how to do this efficiently. I think one of the keys to this, and this is why this conversation is great, is um, kind of an open source platform for sharing effective practices and effective products, so that
Mhm. Yeah.
architects and contractors are sharing information with one another to help each other um, and share their success stories and their challenges and how to do this right.
Yeah, great. I think one of the challenges I hear when I speak with vendors and buyers on a mass, but also from a real estate development experience, is that a lot of contractors and subcontractors don't really know how to work with the material. They're so used to the old way of doing things. When you bring a new material, sometimes being it's a challenge for them to learn how to work with things that are maybe more effective, more efficient, saves money, time, energy, etc. Is that your experience, or you see welcoming to this new practices also on the level of the construction site?
I think that's starting to change, but I have seen that. I think this is not just true of our industry, but a lot of industries where, the status quo is guarded very, very dearly. Like change is scary, and it's a learning
Yeah,
curve, right, for certain trades and as new materials get introduced. And I think that's why continuing education and like just constantly getting the word out about this stuff and having platforms to share this kind of knowledge to make it less intimidating and easier to adopt, I think is a critical part of making this happen. Because, addressing climate action as architects and construction managers or contractors is not really optional, right? I mean, it's something that we are going to all have to be working together in order to achieve the kind of goals we're going to need to achieve to get to a real, net zero carbon environment in a reasonable amount of time. So we need, everybody
yeah,
pulling in together and pulling in the same direction.
cool. Moving to a little different question. If you're looking a year, 3 years, even 5 years from now, one of the most exciting trends you see right now that are being developing, being used by either your firm or you're aware of that you think is something you want to talk about because it's exciting for you?
That's a great question. One of the things that I'm starting to see as a trend, this is, again, it's happening in design, but it's happening in other industries as well, is a focus on using data-driven tools and data-driven design research in order to develop concepts or develop solutions to design problems. And I think more and more designers are needing to have knowledge and education about data and research and how that plays into a design process. So I think that plays into the kinds of analysis that we need to do on our buildings now to understand, in order to do these kind of whole building analysis. A lot of times we'll work with consultants on some of these really complex areas and engineers from lots of different fields, but it's really I'm seeing more and more folks on my side of the table that are on the design side needing to really have an understanding of a kind of a data-driven or research-driven design process.
So when you say data, do you mean the usage of material, the design, the structural and architectural and mechanical usage, or do
All
you
of the
include
above.
that from? Mhm.
I
I
think all
got
of the
you.
above. It has to do with inside and outside the building. It has to do with, the right articulation of and orientation of your facade. It has to do with your building systems. It has to do with, engineering, or I would say energy programming on the inside of a building to understand what parts of the building have high intensity uses and which ones might have lower intensity uses where you could use more passive strategies. A lot of that involves collecting and understanding a certain amount of data about the building or the proposed building.
That's great. Okay, and then a different subject also. I'd love to hear your take on it. So we've all been through a fundamental, I'm guessing, uh, fundamental shift in the way we do business, the way we interact because of COVID-19. So we all work from home and less traveling, all the other things that disappeared really fast. Um, uh, you live in New York City, I'm in New York City. How do you see urban centers? How do you see cities in the next 5, 10, 15 years Do you see a major change, a shift? How do you hear when you talk to your clients? What's their experience? What their intention? What we're going to do with all those skyscrapers when we, go back to normal life, maybe in 3 to 6 months? How do you see that? It'll be great to get your take on it.
So I can give my thoughts on some of that, but I have to say I'm not a workplace expert, and so understanding about what may happen with commercial real estate with regards to workplaces is I have some thoughts on it, but I'm not an expert in that area. But and so I'm
We
curious
still want to
to
hear your
see what
thoughts,
happens.
because
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
curious to see what happens with our workplaces. I do think that um, many people will go back to work, but I do think there will be some long-term change because of the experience of COVID lessons
Do,
to
do you
work
do you
remotely and that people can be productive that way.
Yeah. Have you changed any of your design or the interaction with clients due to COVID? Not from like Zoom
Sure.
versus in person. I'm talking about like from a design perspective. Like, was the new concern that showed up from your designs, from the mission statement, because of the last year, in the
I would
process you were
say
doing with your clients?
sure, a little bit in lots of different ways and different on every project. I would say clients are much more concerned about healthy air, right? And
Mm,
making sure that their buildings have very, very high quality and healthy air, healthy environments for the people inside those buildings. So I think that strategy and how to get there, depending on the building typology and what the program is, there's going to be different strategies. But that's increasingly part of the conversation that a client maybe never would have said before, early on in a process. Well, we have to make sure this building has very healthy air. So people are concerned about health and wellness of the users of the buildings, and that's become a conversation that is more in the foreground now. So that's really positive. And then I would say, in terms of how we do things, we do a lot of stakeholder engagement with, especially on our institutional projects, and that involves sometimes, if it's a campus project, talking to students, talking to faculty, talking to administration, talking to neighborhoods, talking to lots and lots of different groups, and we've had to do all of that remotely, right? We've had to do all of that
mm, yeah.
online, and it's been a great learning experience. I think it's actually worked out very well, because one of the things about the online platform is that, in a way, it's very democratic. It can be more inclusive, because people can tap in from wherever they are. Like, you can literally meet people where they are, in their living room or in their dorm. Um, if you have a kind of a workshop or a kind of a community group and you invite people to come, and it's at a certain time of day, and you don't provide childcare, or people have to, like, people are, it self-selects a certain group of people that want to get involved, that want
Yes.
to give feedback, and that want to be part of the process. But if you can have an online process, or it may be a parallel one when we get to the point where we can meet again in real life, it lets a lot more people tap in and participate. So I think that's been like one of the great lessons learned from this, is like how this can,
Mm.
ultimately give us a way to have a more inclusive process where we can have more diverse voices involved in these conversations about our buildings.
What a great point. And I haven't thought about it. And actually, the fact that we're all on Zoom and we're so used to it, or whatever the video tool we're using, when we go back to the office, there'll be a more welcoming and familiar usage of video. So we can have someone who's an expert or have a feedback who's sitting in Africa or sitting in Europe, and it's no big deal. It's no longer we're sitting in a room and, by the way, they're sticking their nose into our conversation. It's one holistic conversation because we're so used to it. We've done it for a year. That's a really great point.
Yeah, we've gotten
Well,
really comfortable with it. So yeah,
yeah,
I think that's a
exactly. Yeah,
silver lining for sure.
it, no, exactly. Why not, right? So first of all, thank you. It's been nothing but a pleasure. We love those bits and pieces of conversations. I think we're up to something very, very big, whether it's a mass. I think on your world, on a mass, we're trying to bring innovation or an efficiency to an inefficient world. We need more efficiency, whether efficiency in the use of energy and responsibility for the planet and for ourselves, or making people spend less time on busyness and more on creativity and effectiveness. So I think we're matched in that perspective. I really appreciate the time you spend with us, and it's
Thank
nothing but a
you.
pleasure.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks
And
for having me.
please keep in touch. Of
Will
course, what a
do.
pleasure. Bye,
Will
everybody.
do.
Thank you so
Bye,
much. Thank you.
everybody.